What first inspired me was when I was growing up, my mum used to leave all sorts of thrillers hanging around in all sorts of coves and holes at home, and I used to pick them up and I used to just start reading them in my teens. And so thrillers have always been very close to my heart, always been something that I've loved. And yeah, I mean, I was pretty clear from pretty early on that if I was going to write, it was going to be a thriller. I'm a big fan of American crime fiction. I've always grown up reading American crime fiction, probably much more than British crime fiction, even though my books are actually set in the UK. Authors I love are many and varied, but I guess the biggest influence on me and the author I love the most is probably Michael Connelly. I think how do you come up with your ideas is probably the question you get asked the most as an author, and I think that I'm not sure there's any really satisfying answer to that. From my point of view, there's infinite ideas, there's loads of ideas, and lots of ideas come to me at lots of different times. In fact, they're coming to me all the time, which is why I carry a notebook around with me. But it's not so much the ideas, it's how you knit those ideas together into a cohesive whole, and I think that's the real challenge as a writer, not perhaps coming up with the original idea, but how to push that idea forward and see it through to its conclusion. Growing up, I'd read a lot of traditional police procedural thrillers, and I admire them completely. And I wanted to do something that was kind of in the same field and had a kind of familiar feel, but at the same time, I wanted something that just gave it a little bit of a twist. And Missing Persons seemed quite interesting to me. It was an area that's very emotive. It's you know, people go missing all the time, and some of these people never come home again. And it seems amazing that in this day of 24-hour news channels and CCTV on every street corner that these people can just vanish into thin air. It just seems incredible. So that really set my interests going. And when I looked further into it, I was just astonished by the amount of people that actually did go missing every year in the UK alone. So it seemed like a good starting point for a kind of series. And also I thought it ran very nicely in parallel with David Raker as a character, who is my series character, and how he felt about his wife and how he was grieving about his wife and how he would be able to identify with these people when they came to see him. No, he's not based on anyone particularly. I think almost inevitably parts of yourself as a writer go into your character. I think that's anyone who says that that's not the case is probably telling a bit of a porky, because you do end up getting bits of you into the character. But I think one of the reasons that I wanted to do Missing Persons investigator and how kind of David Raker grew out of that was this need I felt for a little bit of a character with a bit of an emotional core. I mentioned earlier I really loved American crime fiction and grew up reading American crime fiction. And one of the reasons I really connected with American crime fiction was I felt that some of it, not all of it, but some of it had a real emotional heart that perhaps you don't get so much in British crime fiction. And I think I really connected with those characters, and I definitely wanted to bring that across to Raker and give him a real emotional centre, as well as being a great detective and a great hero for the books. I get asked about David and Liz surprisingly often, and really it's quite nice that, because Liz really was quite a last minute addition to Chasing the Dead, my first book, and I never expected her to resonate, and that relationship to resonate quite as well as it has. I don't want to spoil too much about what goes on in Vanish, so I won't talk about it too much. But I think their relationship is certainly one of several relationships in the books that span all three of the books, and I think it's probably the one that people want to see turn out nicely. Whether it will or not, I guess we'll just have to find out once we read the book. I love writing Healy. I think the reason I introduced Healy really was because in Chasing the Dead, David was very much the kind of lone wolf. He was having to face some pretty dark characters in that first book who took him to some pretty dark places. And when I came to write the Dead Tracks, my second book, I was determined that I didn't want to repeat what I'd done in the first book. I wanted to do something a little bit different, and it seemed like a good stage to kind of bring someone else into the fold. And Healy was like the sort of in many ways the polar opposite of Raker, but at the same time they're very, very close a lot of the time in the way they think and the way they've both lost people and the way in which they grieve quite similarly. So it's an interesting dynamic. It's really fun to write because Healy's like the release valve, you know, he just goes off and he's just a hothead, whereas Raker's like the other side of the coin. He's very similar to Healy, but much better at kind of keeping his emotions in check, and it provides a really interesting dynamic when they're taking on these cases together. Again, that comes up quite a lot. You know, people say your stuff is very filmic, and that pleases me because it means that people can immediately visualize these books, these characters, where it's going and where it's set. So that's good. And yes, definitely. I mean, television and film have played a big part in my upbringing. I'm a massive film fan. Again, with TV series, I've grown up watching a lot of American TV series, especially latterly, where their TV output is so exceedingly strong. And yeah, I mean, you know, great. There's so much great writing in American TV and so much great visualization that I think it's easy to be inspired by that. And you know, Raker himself is a bit of an 80s action movie fan. And that really is just born out of the fact that I'm a bit of an 80s action movie fan. So he had to be, really. Yeah, definitely. I would consider a different setting. I mean, London really came out of the fact that I wanted my thrillers were based in the UK, and I wanted a city that would give my characters an appropriate level of danger. And so London really was not born out of the fact that I had any particular affinity with the city, although I have nothing against London, but more that it just provided a really good canvas to paint all these characters and the situations they get into. But would I take it outside of London? Absolutely I would, and in fact that's exactly what I'm going to do in book 4. So book 4 is about a family that completely vanish into thin air, disappear from their home. And what I mean by that is the sister of the wife of the family turns up at their house, the front door is open, she walks in, the food's still cooking on the stove, the TV's still playing, the kids' toys are all over the floor, the dog's still wandering around the house, but the family members aren't anywhere near there. In fact, they've completely gone. And the mystery comes out of the fact that it literally looks like they vanished into thin air. They've left the house for some reason and never come back.